The German offensive had regained some of its momentum. Reinforced with armored cars for reconnaissance and heavy mortars to soften up any resistance, the spearhead force raced ever onwards. Their change in tactics immediately paid off, as the scouts could report on an approaching force further down the road. The Red Army had brought more tanks this time. The Germans sent their tanks forward to meet the enemy, supported by the armored cars, while the softer transports were held back until the enemy armor had been dealt with. We once again rolled the scenario of the hard road east, and there were 4 objectives. 1 on the road junction, 1 on the bridge, 1 on the eastern hill, and 1 in the open field west of the junction. The Soviets brought only 1 BA-10 this time, while the Germans had 2 SD KFZ 231s, and for once they had a superior scouting force. Starting on the field of battle, the Soviets had 3 BT-5s blocking the road, while an AT gun had been deployed by some marsh off the road. The Germans had 2 Panzer IIIFs to face them before the rest of the force arrived. 2 objectives had been claimed at the start of the battle, and the Soviet force had been outscouted, so a few battle counters had to be pulled before the battle started. The Soviets then kicked off with 3 orders. The AT gun opened with 2 shots against the 231 on the road. It spotted it, and the first shot hit. It failed to spot for the second shot, however. The shell bounced off the car, and the morale test was taken, and passed. The Soviets then gave the tanks the stall order and could activate all of them. All 3 BT-5s raced forward while firing the general direction of the enemy. They all needed 6s to suppress the enclosed vehicles. The BA-10 fired a single shot at the 231 on the bridge, but didn't manage to spot it, and the turn passed to the German attackers. The Germans only got 2 orders to meet the Soviet tank rush. The 2 panzers are ordered to fight back. The first one drives forward to take the objective and fire into the leading BT-5. With both tanks moving, it barely misses. The other panzer fires at the same target. The first shot hits, but the shot bounces off the side armor, forcing a morale test. The crew is pinned. The second shot also hits, but it just causes an automatic pin. Another morale test is taken, but this one is passed. After a short turn, the Soviet reserves start to arrive. They rolled 5 orders and could try to start dealing some damage to the German armor. A BT-5 aimed and fired at Panzer III in the open field. The first shot missed, but the second scored a solid hit. The shell punched through the front armor as if it was made of paper. A Beyond the Call of Duty counter was pulled. 231 on the bridge, seeing the Panzer get blown up, drove forward to take revenge. He tried to use the BT-5 as cover while firing at its side point blank. The small shell hit, but bounced harmlessly off. It didn't even shake the crew. The BT-5 by the junction swung its turret around to face the new target. It fired twice and missed with the first shot, but hit with the second. Another effective shot and another target down. Then a KV-2 that had arrived from reserves came rumbling down the road. Behind the hill, an AT gun and the Soviet infantry moved forward to join the fight. The Germans were fighting uphill now, and they only got one unit from reserves. They sent in their last panzer and rolled 5 orders, but had only 3 units to issue them to. The panzer by the river drove onto the bridge and fired into the front of the nearest BT-5. It scored a hit and took the Soviet armor out of action with its first shot. The newly arrived panzer took aim at the tank by the junction. It didn't expect to hit since it needed a 6, so it rolled both spotting checks right away and passed both. But the first shot hit. The shell bounced off the front armor, but the crew was pinned. Likewise, the 231 remained stationary and fired twice at the BA-10 on the hill. It made 2 spotting checks and passed both. The car fired once and missed, but it forgot to fire its second shot. For the Soviets, 2 more infantry units arrived onto the field of battle, and they rolled 4 orders. The BA-10 took aim at the panzer on the bridge. It managed to spot it twice. The first shell flew harmlessly by. And the second one wasn't even close. The truck drove up behind the hill and deployed the AT gun. It was immediately put into action and fired at the same tank as the BA-10. It spotted it and hit. The shell bounced off and the crew remained unshaken. The Soviets reloaded the gun, retained their target, but missed. Yelling "Ura!", the Soviet officer brought more infantry forward, ready to throw them into the fighting when the opportunity presented itself. The Soviet player may have miscounted his orders, because he also sent the KV-2 forward to take care of the panzers. It moved off the road and aimed at the enemy on the bridge. It spotted it. The hit roll was cocked, but the reroll was good. Hit. The powerful gun needed only 5 up to destroy the panzer. Little more than a pile of twisted, smoking metal remained of the lead tank of the Panzer III squad. And again, the Germans could send in only one unit from reserves. With one officer down, the Germans received only 2 orders. The Tu-31 remained stationary and fired on the biggest threat, the KV-2, needing 5s to hit. One of the 2 shots hit, and that's when we learned that the Tu-31 has no way of actually damaging the huge beast of a tank with its weak cannon. The Germans instead sent their Panzer III forward to attack it, since it could at least pin the thing on a hit. But no hit was achieved. A poor round for the Germans. The rest of the Soviet troops arrived, and the Germans were beginning to feel the pressure. Again, with a yell of "Ura Ura", the Soviet infantry surged forwards. They then followed up with a stall order, and the armor also rushed forward to shore up the German advance. At the end of the movement, one of the BT-5s took a pot shot at the Tu-31. But missed. The gun on the hill took aim at the Tu-31 on the road and was looking for a 4-up. Having done its job, the truck moved back. Lastly, the gun by the marshes adjusted its position and took a shot at the Tu-31 as well. But had no more luck than the other gun. The Germans used their Panzer March to get some reinforcements, and finally the infantry started to arrive. The remaining Panzer III fired at the nearest unpinned BT-5. It hit with the first shot and needed 8 up to destroy it. The shot bounced off, but managed to pin it. The second shot missed. The Tu-31 moved up and took aim at the last unpinned BT-5. I spotted it and needed a 5 to hit, and 8 up to destroy. The tank remained intact, but it shook the crew enough that they decided to abandon the vehicle. The light mortar team moved up and took aim at the AT gun, but they were just out of range. For the last order, the Germans sent the infantry forward and disembarked the first squads near the bridge, using the burning wreckage of the Panzer as cover. Only 2 orders for the Soviets may give the Germans some room to breathe. Again, the Soviet officer yelled "Ura Ura", and all the nearby infantry surged forwards. And the KV-2 took aim at the 231 and fired a single shot. Hit. They just needed to avoid snake eyes. With their turn done, the Soviets decided to remove D6 pin markers. The rest of the German reserves arrived, and with 8 orders they were ready to strike at the Red Army. For the first order, the platoon commander disembarked onto the hill, where they had a clear view of the battlefield. And for the next few orders, the command squad radioed the off-table mortars to request a barrage against the approaching infantry. The communications test was good. The barrage missed and deviated towards the river. Four shots were fired by the mortars, and all resulting in pinning hits. A 6 was needed to pin the KV-2, and the rest were pinned on 4 up. However, they did get a cover save of 6. Explosions and pillars of dirt and smoke filled the open field, but only the AT gun was visibly shaken. The light mortar tried to help with the barrage, but needed a 5 to pin the infantry squad. The Panzer fired twice at the unpinned BT-5 and rolled 2 spotting checks. It had a cleared shot and needed force to hit. Both shells whizzed past the Soviet tank. The rifle squad moved up the riverbank and opened up with area fire against the nearest infantry squad, needing a 4 to pin. Great success! The MG team did the same to the infantry behind the first squad and needed a 5. A truck rolled up and more German infantry disembarked near the river. This time it was the Germans who miscounted their orders, and the infantry squad opened fire on the enemy infantry, needing a 5 to pin them. Most likely, they forgot to spend an order to fire with the medium mortars. Again, the Soviets had only 2 orders to spend. The BT-5 sped forwards and got dangerously close to the Panzer III. It fired 1 shot against the front of the Panzer, but missed. The KV-2 swung the turret around and loaded its last shell. It aimed at the Panzer and needed a 4 to hit. They then decided to pull yet another battle counter to remove these 6 pins. And suddenly, none of the Soviet units were pinned. The Germans got 5 orders and used their first to request another barrage. But this time there were problems with the communication. The Panzer fired 2 shots, 1 at each of the 2 nearest BT-5s. It needed 3 to hit the first one, and 6 to penetrate. 1 tank destroyed. Against the other tank, it first needed 2 to spot and 3 to hit. The shell hit but bounced off. The crew took a morale check but remained unshaken. The rifle squad opened up with direct fire against the nearest target, needing a 3 to spot them and forced to hit. Two soldiers went down, and the rest needed to take a morale check. The Soviets hit dirt and denied the Germans the chance to get off another salvo. The MG team did the same, needing the same numbers. Three lethal hits were scored, and the Soviet infantry squad decided to fall back. We then realized we forgot to roll the morale check after the first casualties. They failed it and were pinned, and therefore couldn't fall back. A new morale check was made for the second round of casualties, and they decided to rout. Unfortunately, that was the last drop for the Soviet battle group, whose morale was already a bit shaken after having taken a beating. Seeing the infantry squad flee triggered a cascade of routs, and the Germans were left standing as the victors. The German battle group still had a remaining battle rating of 13.